Hello and welcome to the Data Privacy Lawyer. My name is Funmi Owolabi and I'm the principal attorney at the firm. Today's review, we're going to be looking at a privacy policy. So I will say one thing that I've seen a couple times now is I've not been presented with any type of cookie banner. Now there may be a couple of reasons for that. It may be that they don't collect any cookies that are not essential. Let's do cookies in a different review. Today's review, I thought it would be interesting to take a look at a privacy policy. It appears that this organization is located in the United Kingdom in Surrey. So I want to talk about the data protection laws that apply in the United Kingdom. And then I also want to talk about the extraterritorial effect of many other legislation that has come out of other geographies that could influence a business's privacy program. So there's some detail here about who the data controller is. Let me give you some insight because I don't see a definition of what this constitutes. And I think that it's very important for businesses to have definitions in their notices because many consumers don't know what a data controller is. A data controller determines the means and purpose of processing. Now, what does that mean? I'll give you an example. Let's talk about my business, okay? So I own a law firm, right? My law firm's name is the Data Privacy Lawyer PLLC. Okay, I'm the data controller. I determine the purpose for collecting data. So if a customer reaches out to me and says, hey, Funmi, I want you to draft a privacy notice for me. Okay, the purpose is clear when I collect that customer's information. The purpose is I'm going to provide them a service. Now, the means in which I facilitate that is I will put their information into my client management system, which is simple law. So I've now determined the means. I look at my intake form and I put that information in my client management system. And then from there, I can collect additional details around providing them that service. For example, obtaining their payment information, right? I determine the means and the purpose. That is my responsibility as the law firm owner, okay? So it's really important to understand what these definitions mean because that also comes with responsibility when you're a data controller. Let's talk about my firm again. If a customer says to me, hey, Funmi, I want to have access to the data you've collected on me. My responsibility as a data controller is to facilitate that within the applicable time frame. Okay, so I have to look at where this customer is resident, what is the time frame required under the data protection law where they are a resident, and provide them access to their information based on the time frame in that geography. That's my responsibility as a data controller. Let's talk about other responsibilities of a data controller. If a data controller finds themselves in an unfortunate situation where a bad actor conducts a data breach, okay, I then need to look at all of the data in my repository and I need to take a look at what is known as data breach legislation. There's legislation that dictates how data controllers have to conduct themselves when a data breach has occurred, whether it is that they need to notify those that have been unfortunately in the crosshairs of the data breach, or they need to notify a specific regulator in the geography where the breach occurred, right? Being a data controller comes with a lot of responsibilities and businesses need to understand those responsibilities, which is why I think it's valuable to have a definition because what I've just explained right now, many consumers of products don't even know what that is. The reason that I know is because I'm a data privacy lawyer. So let's keep looking through this. This is an important notice regarding your privacy and the way in which this company collects and makes use of your data. We want to be open and transparent with you. Let's talk about transparency. Transparency is very important because it's one of the founding principles for privacy and data protection. Being transparent means you let your consumers know what it is that you're doing. If what you are doing changes, you need to let consumers know. If the law changes requiring you to change as a business, you also need to let the consumers know. So there's many different ways of looking at what constitutes transparency, but it's a very important principle from a data protection standpoint. This policy also applies to applicants, customers, and visitors to our offices. So I'm not a visitor to the office, but I am a visitor of the website. Let me just make sure that this applies to me. So it looks like, just based off of this sentence, that this applies to applicants, customers, and visitors to the offices generally. They've used the word generally, but I guess there's a presumption we can make that this also applies to website visitors because this appears on the website. Now, that would be a detail that I would need to ask specifically, but I think scope is really important. Let's scroll down and look at provisions that we've not looked at regularly. Let's talk about legal basis, okay? So I talked a little bit about controllers. Controllers have to rely on something called a legal basis in order to legitimize their processing of personal data or their processing activities, right? And there are many legal bases. We're not going to go into that discussion for this review, but what I can say is that it's incredibly important for an organization to list out all their processing activities. One of the first things that I always ask businesses to do is list out every way in which you use personal data. You need to create an inventory of that, because from there you can determine the appropriate legal bases that you can rely on, one, based on geography, and two, based on the activity that you're conducting. Certain activities require a specific legal basis. For example, in some geographies, if you are going to process sensitive data, the only legal basis you can rely on is consent. You cannot rely on anything else, okay? In some geographies. Now, I add that with nuance because I need to take a look at the processing activities. But generally, if you're going to process sensitive data, you need to be relying on consent. Now, the caveat I will add there is not every geography has a succinct data protection law. So that's another consideration businesses need to have. Where do you operate? So we can see some of the legal bases they've listed. Consent, they've got here, performance of the contract, legal obligation, and legitimate interests. So it's really important to outline these and identify the fact to your consumers from a transparency perspective that you are relying on legal bases to process their information. So I really hope you enjoyed this review. If you have comments or questions about what I've stated, leave them below and I will see you in another review.